All right, that's good. That's good. And we are up, I think. Rob, what's happening, man? How you feeling tonight?
Doing great, Chris. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you being here. And I guess where we should start this is that, from what I do know about you, hey, you adopted, I guess, a philosophy of a 4-day work week. And so,
Yeah.
but before we start diving into that philosophy or how you came up with that, maybe you should just give the listeners maybe just a small tidbit background about yourself, and then we can start rolling from there.
Yeah. I'm, born in a small town in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and to some really supportive Midwestern parents, and ended up going to school and got 3 degrees: a finance degree, Spanish, and management degree.
Nice.
And I was a sell side equity analyst when I graduated college, so I researched medical device and pharmaceutical stocks. And I'm a CFA charter holder. Not a lot of people know what that is, but it's basically like a certification for, it's kind of like an MBA for financial analysis, but it's a separate designation. But I just didn't feel like I was helping people in that career enough. And so I ended up starting my first business on the side, which was an anytime fitness health club. And so I was working this 60-hour week day job. I did this other business on the side, which was pretty brutal, man, to be honest. But once that was able to sustain my lifestyle, I quit, traveled around the world for a while, and then came back. And I ended up owning or operating 9 businesses in about as many years. And but I sold all the other 8. And now I only have my current business, which is Humans First.
Okay.
And it's a consultancy to help people with a 4-day work week and technology overload.
So you said you had 3 degrees, what, finance, Spanish, and was it math?
Management.
So was that your ultimate goal, was to get 3 degrees and then go on from there? Or what did you have? Did you have this in mind? Did you go out in college and use all 3 of these at the same time, or what?
No, it's a really good question. Honestly, I just really like learning. I really, really enjoy learning stuff. And I actually I was almost going to get a 4th degree, but they wouldn't let you get more than one outside the School of Business. I was going to get an econ degree. But I'm using all of the degrees actually. But I just did it though. I didn't really necessarily have a vision in mind. I just knew I liked learning. And I was like, well, if I'm going to get the credits, I might as well get the degree.
That makes sense to me, but I mean, this seems like that would be a lot for one person to take on and get 3 degrees at once. Or am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, the way I looked at it is like I'm here, like my purpose in life during that time was to learn, and I'm like need to be focused on learning, and why not just dedicate myself to that? I mean, when I as a sort of a side example, when I studied abroad in Madrid, Spain, as part of my Spanish degree, I was there for 6 months for a semester.
Right.
But I said to myself, I am going to be so pissed if I leave Spain and I can't speak fluent Spanish. And so after about a month, I decided I'm just going to completely dedicate myself to this. And I only spoke Spanish, even with my American friends, for the remainder of the trip. And I legitimately think that and I also carried around a notebook with me. And every single time I heard a word that I didn't know that I thought would be useful, I wrote it down, and I would review that notebook going into school every day on the bus. And by the end of my trip, I had over 1,000 words in the notebook that I had memorized. And I still know the vast majority of them today. That was 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago.
Nice, bro. I had this theory, and I don't know if I kind of borrowed it from somebody or I've been working on it, but I want to get your insights on this. But
Yeah.
As far as learning a new language, that I had a conversation with one of my friends that if you listen to only, music in Spanish, like that you would eventually pick up the language and be able to, I don't know, I don't want to say talk fluently, but you'd be able to almost be able to speak it in a sense, as long as you could kind of hear the words, go back. And as far as reading might be different, but hear the words, kind of get a sense of, okay, translate it, what they're saying, and actually learn the language that way. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I for sure think that listening to Spanish music would help learn a language. But I think it would only help for certain parts. I think it would help for learning an accent and then learning specific words. But I think you would need to have a much more deliberate effort in learning the grammar, because the grammar isn't, I'm not sure that you can like learn grammar, like syntax from a song necessarily. But I think that the song and listening would definitely help.
Yeah, I think it's where, if you haven't heard a song in, let's say, like 5 or 10 years, and then it comes back on randomly, and you can also just pick up the lyrics and start getting a beat. I think that's where I kind of picked it up from, is that if you kind of got that in your implanted in your head somehow, that, yeah, you could pick up another language that way in a certain way. But I do agree with you. That makes sense. I guess you can only take it so far, but that's cool though, man. So
yeah. Oh yeah. Heck yeah.
I don't know. So all right. So along we didn't come here to talk about all that, but so along the your path, you adopted this 4-day work week, so to speak. How did this come up?
Yeah, I mean, so just to be clear, I didn't. It's not like I, created the concept of the 4-day work week, but I just highly and heavily endorse it, and that's what my company, Humans First, does. Is we help other companies, or we guide other companies to a 4-day work week with no loss in productivity or profitability. And just to be clear, when I say 4-day work week, I mean 4 8-hour days, not 4 10-hour days.
Gotcha.
So every single person at the company gets a full day of time back. And think about this. So the 5-day work week started in 1926 by Henry Ford with the manufacturing line, right? Sure. So think about we're almost a century into this concept of the 5-day work week, but look at how much has changed in the last century. It just makes sense that we should start to be rethinking how we do work and consider a 4-day work week.
Do you think, all right, I like that. I'm getting along with what you're saying here, but would that apply to as far as a manufacturing perspective, like, with the assembly line, or is this only for, I don't want to say blue collar jobs, more office jobs, or is it both, do you think?
So I think it's both. So I'm actually, working with a nonprofit called 4-day Global, 4-day Week Global. And they have, numerous examples of like a painting company or a manufacturing company or a dentist's office or whatever that have done the 4-day work week. So I would say it's easier to do for a white collar type profession, but it's still very possible. And I still endorse it for blue collar as well. And so I really think it's appropriate for not every company, but almost any company.
Well, I'm just wondering because when I left college, when I got my bachelor's degree, that I was working for a tire company here locally here in Virginia, and I was basically on an assembly line, and my thing was just kind of fixing tires that didn't make the actual mint or whatever you want to say. Mm-hmm. So, but it was a lot of quality versus quantity. Where I hope I said that right. That it seems like more people didn't really care about maybe I'm saying this wrong. More people didn't really care about how long they wanted to be there as long as they could, but they didn't really care about what type of work they were doing. I hope I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah.
And I came in, as a young buck wanting to be that guy, like, oh, we got to get all this shit done. We got to get, we get out of here quicker. I was out working the other guys, and then they're like, no, it doesn't work like this way here.
Yeah, just slow down. You're working too hard.
And so, but I thought I came in with that mentality, I guess, just because, I guess I was just trying to prove myself, or just, I didn't really have anything else to do besides, when you're at work, you work, right? And that was probably before, I don't know, that was probably 2009, 2010. So I guess cell phones were around, but, it wasn't like how it is today where you're just standing around and mindlessly scrolling through Instagram.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean,
yeah, sorry. No, you're good. So I didn't really have another point to that, but I think that's where that question came from, that I learned that, oh, y'all just want to drag this out as long as you can. And then tomorrow to build the same thing. It won't be less work if we do more work today and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, think about it. So totally get what you're saying. And I was laughing because I worked 4 summers in a metal scrapyard, in a junkyard, and I was sorting metal and crushing dirty cans and running the forklift. And so I did a manual job for 4 summers. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happened at my job, where the guy was like, you're moving way too fast, and I guess I just didn't have the perspective that he had been there for 20 years and I had been there for, 20 days, right? Like, sure. It's a different timeline for that intensity. But as a kind of example, so, and again, like, I didn't work with this company, but 4-day Week Global is giving us all these examples of these other companies that had implemented the 4-day work week. And they had a mosquito repellent company where, they send out a guy to your yard and he sprays the yard and, then it kills the mosquitoes, right? Sure. Well, what they found out is they were running the routes where the guys would drive to the different yards really inefficiently. So they got this new they were trying to see, okay, how could we make this more efficient? So they got this new software which routed the guys differently. And because it was that much more efficient in just routing their driving, they could save an extra day a week and give the guys 4 days a week. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's little things like that nobody really thinks about. And, and as far as my work experience, when I've asked questions, things like, well, why do we do it this way? Or, why do we do it, this way 1 year ago when we could have been doing it this way? And one of those things, like it's one of those pet peeves of mine is, well, it's just always been that way, or that's just the way we've always done it. It's like, what the hell, man? That doesn't mean to make it right.
Totally.
Yeah.
It does not.
And it was just like one of those things, well, this could be a better way. And it was like almost, in one of my first full-time jobs, it was like, if I said that to somebody, it was like, oh, no, let's just think about that. We'll mull it over. And it's like, what's there to mull over? This is a simple solution, bro. I mean, right. I don't get it, and I don't know if that's just people not liking change, or if they just want to just keep sticking with say, if it works, if it's not broke, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. Do you mind if I talk a little bit about the psychology of change and why people don't like it?
Yeah, talk about whatever you want to, dude. Yeah, go ahead.
I love psychology, and I just love studying human behavior, right? And so humans as a whole, right, as a species, we hate change.
Correct.
And the reason is because humans have an aversion to losing things, like losing resources or losing power or losing social status. And the reason is resources keep us alive, right? So like we need food, shelter, clothing to stay alive. Those are resources. And so when there's change, and for anything, right, it doesn't matter if it's changing a simple procedure or changing the entire company. What people perceive is that they're losing something. And because they perceive that they're losing something, they perceive it as a threat. And so any change, even if it could be positive, could be perceived negatively if it's not communicated in the right way. And I just think that that's really, so if you can convince someone, hey, I'm not taking anything away from you here, I'm actually giving you this thing, and you can get them to truly believe it, that completely changes their willingness to do something differently.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Just because, our brains are wired basically as a survival instinct kind of thing, that if something does change, that, oh, no, we can't do this, we shouldn't take this chance or something, because, we don't know how it's going to play out, and boom, you might get hurt or you might risk something big. So yeah, that makes perfect sense though. But it's also one of those things too, that I wonder that, if people just don't want to see somebody outshine them, right? Like I kind of saw like that. My supervisor was kind of a lot older at the time, but if I came in and started implementing these new ideas or asking about these new ideas, they're like, no, if I, and I don't want to say that's for everybody. I'm generally speaking, of course. This was just my experience. Yeah. No, we don't want let's not improve that just because it was your idea and maybe not mine.
I mean, to me, that's it's an interesting line of thinking from your former supervisor, right? Because what I would think of is, hey, even if it's not my idea, but I help implement it or I help support that idea, and that is successful for the company, it's still going to make me look good too, even though it wasn't originally my idea. That's just the way I would think about it, I guess.
Well, no, I agree. I mean, we work as a team, and like, I've always thought that, if somebody's wanting to build themselves up or, trying to have a chance to better themselves or make a resume builder, yeah, go for it, dude. I mean, I don't care. I've never been one of those guys, and I mean, maybe people would argue with you on this, but, on a power trip, so to speak, I've always been more of a just, hey man, like I said, just team oriented. I know I'm not the smartest guy in the room, and I never plan on being there, but if there's somebody else who's got great ideas or something, like I have no clue about something, yeah, man, bring it up here. There's no bad ideas. Let's talk about it. Let's see what happens. And if it sucks, all right, we'll move on. We'll just talk it out first. It's not immediately no,
Totally. Well, it's interesting. And again, not specifically in reference to your ex-boss, but I think in general, when people are afraid to endorse other people or support other people or make other people look good, what it actually is it's they themselves are insecure about themselves. Sure. And their insecurity doesn't allow them to be supportive to other people. And as soon as I read a book, it's called my favorite book of all time. I really love books. It's called The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. And it's like, I say it like this: there's life before this book and there's life after this book. It literally changed my entire viewpoint on really all of humanity and how to look at people and understand them. It is just incredible what you can see after you read that book, The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene.
Yeah, I've read the 48 Powers of Law. 48 Powers of Life. Yeah, I've read that, and I currently or recently just bought is it the Daily Laws or the Daily Handbook?
Yeah, Daily Laws. Yeah.
Daily Laws, and it's got what is a mixture of, like, I guess that one you just said, which I haven't read, but the 48 Laws of Power, and then you do a thing on seduction, and
Yep.
Yeah. And it's like each day it's like a quote or an insert from one of his books. That's pretty badass. I don't know if a lot of people give him grief because of writing the 48 Powers of Law or like, what is it? The 48 Powers of Life? Law?
48 Laws of Power.
Laws of Power.
Yeah.
Get that straight. So, but yeah, like I remember listening to a podcast, and this is maybe a little bit off topic, but somebody might relate. Somebody had that book on their desk, right? And so their boss or supervisor or the CEO, I can't remember who came in, saw that book on their desk, and they immediately said, almost tried to fire them for having that book because they thought that they were coming after their job.
I mean, very insecure of that boss.
Yeah. I think that was Ryan Holiday. He writes a couple of like very stoic type books.
Yeah. Ego is the enemy.
There you go. Yeah.
And the obstacle is the way. Yep. I really like his work too.
I recently just read that one, Obstacles Away. So yeah. And I think he was talking about that, and that was him that, he was like, no, I'm just reading the book, and just learning things from it. I'm not, trying to get on a power trip or coming after anybody here. Mm-hmm. It's weird how people just interpret things like that, I guess is what I'm getting at. And like make it judge it, judge first rather than to actually talk it out or think through.
Yeah. I mean, that's, one of the things that I really learned the hard way from, coaching over 100 employees over the last 9 years is, never assume anything, right? Or I guess the only thing that you should assume is good intent.
Sure.
I like that better. The only thing you should assume is good intent. And so like, even if there was some situation that just seems so obvious and clear and plain, like, oh, like this, if I was thinking to myself, like this person clearly did this, I would still ask them instead of accusing, because then they get a chance to explain themselves, or, maybe there's some other extenuating thing that I didn't see that affected the situation. And, when I didn't do that though, when I was just accusatory right off the bat, I mean, I made a bunch of mistakes that were really unfortunate, and I damaged relationships with good employees that I shouldn't have, by doing that.
Yeah. I was a young supervisor at one point, just, managing, student employees on campus, and that I was, learning as I went too. And then I was, trying to read books and pick up things that other people were doing. And I was still learning my own way. And I don't want to say I burned any bridges, but it was other situations, like you said, that I could have probably handled differently, or wish I would have known, received more information before I made a decision, and it's one of those things that, like for podcasting here, for example, or even that, if you have a thought that's saying, just, if you would have said, okay, 48 Laws of Power is the best book you ever read, and that was it was taken out of context. And it's like, well, we can have this long drawn out conversation on why it is, and like, if you came on here and was like, oh, I think all the roads in the world should be painted yellow. And then somebody takes that, it's like, what the hell is this guy talking about? But it's like, well, let's see what he's got to say. Why does he think that way? Let's see what the story goes. And it's too quick to judge. And it's like, that's one of the things that, okay, sit down, take a minute, and I guess you can't say that for every scenario. I mean, there's different situations, but yeah, for most things I was like, let's gather all the facts, all the information, and then try to go after it.
Yeah. Well, it's what you're saying is interesting. And I could tie it to something else that I've been just thinking a lot about lately is, like, let's pretend that, you and I we're on Facebook, and I see you make some sort of post, and I comment, and I don't think about it very much, but I comment something and it really makes you upset, right?
Sure.
Well, the problem with that is when I make that comment, I don't see either the sadness or the anger or the despair or whatever on your face. I don't have an emotional connection to the comment that I made and the emotions that you experienced. There's no empathy, right? There's no empathy. And so this lack of empathy and lack of feedback, right? Because I'm not normally in a conversation like this where I can see your face, I get feedback as soon as I say something. And when there's no feedback and no empathy, this gives people permission, or they think it gives themselves permission to just say nasty things to other people online. And I think that lack of empathy is really driving a lot of these totally crazy conversations online, where people just get into these really bitter discussions about whatever. It doesn't matter what it is, right? But so the rule that I've kind of developed for myself is I wouldn't write anything online, whether it's a comment or something else otherwise, that I wouldn't say to somebody's face.
It's a good rule. That's a real good rule. And, and just going on with that it's one of those things that I think in today's times that so many people want to be right, or maybe they just love arguing anymore just because it's so easy to do it on through a keyboard. And you talking about a 4-day work week, maybe somebody will just want to go, no, screw that. I want a 5-day work week just because I want to start a fight, Yeah. And it's just there's trolls out there, right? And it's just, man, it's like, what are these people doing? Like spending that time like arguing with you or the rest of the world on the internet when they could have just put that energy getting 3 degrees and doing something bigger with their lives rather than just sitting behind a keyboard.
Well, you know what's interesting, man? I kind of have a theory about why this is happening, other than what I just said, right? And so, if you look at this, two psychologists, the last names Ryan and Deci, came up with this theory of what humans need at a very basic level, and they came up with this theory in about the year 2000. And so, the three things that all humans need are this: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Okay.
And I think that those three things are structured like this. I think that autonomy is at the very top, where every single person, their most basic need is autonomy. Because if you don't have autonomy, you cannot change things to survive. So in other words, like if I'm in a box and I'm strapped down and then the box fills up with water, I already automatically give up because I know that I can't win. It's super demoralizing. But if I can swim and I'm in the box, then I know that there's a chance that I can survive and get out. I have autonomy, right? So I think that that's the most basic need that all humans need. Then if you think about mastery and purpose, I think that they're like on a seesaw, and I think that they need to be balanced out. You can think of purpose as connectedness or being a part of something greater than yourself. And you can think of mastery as progress towards something that's meaningful in your life, like success in a career, for instance.
Sure.
Well, if you think about what's happening to the world today, I think that we have a lot less purpose, a lot less connectedness. This need for purpose or connectedness is the need isn't going away, but our connectedness with other people is diminishing. Right. And so if that's on the seesaw with mastery, then I think that people need a greater sense of mastery in order to balance out the lack of connectedness. And they feel like there's mastery when they are right or correct, or, when they're win a battle or win an argument. And so I think that this is, this lack of connectedness is kind of manifesting itself in more people wanting to be right online and make these nasty comments to people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, touching on that a little bit, that, COVID taught us that, we were living on momentum, and then all of a sudden it got put to halt, and all of our connections just drowned it out, especially if you lived in a city where it was like, no, you cannot leave your building or whatever. And that, humans wanted to still seek out some kind of attention. And there's people out there like, oh, I'm a lone wolf, I don't really need anybody. But, I think based on human psychology, like you're talking about, we're very tribal and we need these human connections in some sort of way. And like you talked about autonomy and mastery and purpose, I mean, having those connections and builds all three of those things, like you just, said very well. And I think that people started to realize that they are not as wanting to be alone as much as they thought they did.
Yeah. So what's one of my favorite statistics that I learned in researching technology mindfulness is the sense of closeness between two people drops by 80% if they haven't seen each other in person in 5 months, in only 5 months. And that's in person. Like a phone call doesn't count, a text messages doesn't count, it has to be in person. And so imagine what happened during COVID, right? How much did the sense of closeness drop when we didn't see some people for years?
Yeah.
Right. Basically the closeness between those people didn't exist anymore almost. And so like the rule of thumb that I have for myself is if I really want to try to maintain a close connection with people in my life, I need to see them at least once a quarter in person or 4 times a year, which is a lot. It's a lot if they're far away, right? I mean, I'm not going to fly across the country to see one person 4 times a year unless it's really somebody special or whatever. Because how many times could I do that for how many people I know, right?
Yeah, I like that. I like that statistic because you said it didn't matter if it was on. It didn't count if you were on like a Zoom call or a phone call or whatever.
Correct.
It's got to be. Yeah, because I've asked people on here, and I get your thoughts on this. That if you and I were having this conversation in person, in comparison to over Zoom, would it be a completely different conversation?
Yeah. So I love this is again like so much psychology behind this, but So you can think of the way that humans transfer emotion as reading other people's faces, but more importantly, reading the area around their eyes.
Okay.
And that's called limbic resonance. So when we're in person, we have the highest amount of limbic resonance, meaning that my emotion is being transferred to you even without words, just by the way that we look at each other. Well, what's interesting is when we're in person, and especially when there's warm human touch like a hug, right?
Sure.
Our brains release two chemicals, serotonin and oxytocin. Oxytocin, especially, is this chemical that makes us feel loved and cared for and supported. Well, what happens is when we do digital communication, even like Zoom, but also text messaging and phone calls, there's less oxytocin and serotonin released. So we feel less cared for, less supported, less loved, and there isn't as much connection. It actually affects our brain chemistry differently when we use technology versus when we are in person and give people hugs or are talking in person. It actually is different brain chemistry.
So in younger generations who grew up with screens in their face all the time, is this, we're seeing a different brain chemistry from them, do you think?
Yes, this is why I think about this. We are the most connected we've ever been as a species, yet people are reporting the highest levels of loneliness ever.
Sure.
Why would that be? It's because we are using so much digital technology and replacing it and replacing what used to be in-person communication or events, right? It's not just communicating, it's everything. It's like people are going to concerts on Zoom now instead of going to a concert in person. And I personally think that that's totally crazy. Like the whole point of the concert for me is like being with the energy of the people, like that's what I love. And so I think that there's tons of things that we were replacing that used to be in person that we're not doing in person anymore. And I don't think that's good for, I don't think it's good for human connection. And think about it this way. So one of the main ways that humans deal with stress is our social support system that I was just talking about, our feeling of connectedness with other people that we care about in our life, like our family and friends and spouse. Well, when your perceived support system is diminishing, you have a worse ability to deal with stress. And what's also happening in our world is we have more stress due to technology. So more stress from technology and less ability to deal with it because we have less social support. Both of those are going in the wrong direction.
Oh, I agree 100% with that, man. Just because, and even with the self-development of a child and even the cognitive development, just exactly what you said that, and I don't know any statistics and I'm probably the last person who should even be talking about this, but I could tell that growing up, and going to school over Zoom cannot be great for the brain.
No.
Yeah. There's no way that, sitting there on it. I mean, I forgot where I was listening from or where I got it from, but students were, just turning off their computers or putting the video off while they just listen, barely even listen, and probably played a video game during the whole time during school. Right. So, yeah, it was one of these things like, how can this work out? Is this even school anymore? I mean, for example, like, I did PE for my bachelor's degree and then.
Nice.
Yeah. And so I was wondering that, I forgot who I was talking about this with, that I was like, well, how are they even doing PE through Zoom? And
That's wild.
And it was like one of these things that they would just send out an email or I don't know what it was, an assignment that's saying like, oh, we told the students to go run around the house or something for 3 laps or something. It was something crazy like that. I mean, I'm probably butchering that really bad. So, and I don't mean to offend any PE teachers or anything out there like that, but it was something like, there's no way these kids are probably doing that. There's like, no. How can this be educational and anything is one point. So, and
I agree, man.
And even taking a test. I mean, yeah, I was not the best student by any means, but having Google and computers here, taking a test now. I mean, oh yeah, sorry, teacher, I didn't cheat. Don't worry about me. I'm good.
What's interesting is I heard and I don't remember which school district it was, but some school districts had test scores that were like astronomically higher during COVID. And what was happening is the parents were taking the tests or helping the kids with the test. Well, what did you think was going to happen? It was like test scores were like this and then, well, okay.
Well, I mean, I'm not knocking. Actually, I shouldn't be even talking about it because, when, I work in higher education now, but when COVID came made everything stop, that nobody knew what to do, right? All the professors had to take all their classes online at at the last minute at the speed of light, and nobody really knew. So they were just, again, it was one of those things, throwing shit on the wall and seeing what would stick. And so, but it was kind of like, I guess that was the best they could do at the time. I don't think nobody deliberately was trying to, screw people over, I guess, as far as education was. So I just want to make sure I said that, not to be too harsh on anybody.
Totally. And my dad was not only a teacher, but also a vice principal at a high school, his career. So I get it. I totally understand that. My mother-in-law is a teacher. I really respect the teaching profession. I think they do great things. And I think everyone was doing the best they could, like you said. I mean, it was far from an ideal situation. And I'm super grateful I didn't have to put any kids of mine through school during COVID, because I think that would have been really tough.
Yeah. And just kind of even talking about technology and or even the Zoom calls and using the internet now to teach children and the cognitive development. I mean, is this part of your technology mindfulness that you kind of have, and what I read about a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of define technology mindfulness as having an awareness of using technology in a way that makes your life easier instead of harder.
Sure.
And there's all these things that people are doing to themselves with technology that I don't even think they're aware of. And I just really I just wish I had like a megaphone where I could blast this information to the 4.2 billion people connected to the internet, because I know that it would change the lives of so many people, right? And let me just give you like a really simple example that I'm sure will resonate with many of your listeners. So let's just pretend it's 10 o'clock, right? And you're getting ready for bed. You're going to go to bed in like 20 minutes. You're like, you know what? I'm just going to check my email one more time before I go to bed, right? I did this too. So many times. You're like, I'm going to check my email one more time on my phone before I go to bed.
I know.
So you check your email, right? And you get an email from your boss and it says something really offensive to you and it pisses you off. Well, now here's what's happening. So like, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, I'm probably not going to respond to my boss, because that will let him know that I'm up at 10 o'clock and reading email. And I don't want him to think that I'm reading email at 10 o'clock or that I'm going to respond to it. But then if you don't respond, then you're kind of like stewing in this anger, right? You're like, you can't resolve this anger. And so what does that do? That activates your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight system that, helps you get out of threatening situations. And even though there isn't like a threat to your life, you still perceive there to be a threat, maybe to your career or your job, right? And so your sympathetic nervous system, this fight or flight system, gets activated. And then a bunch of things happen, right? But the main implications are this. Not only do you go to bed probably way later than you wanted to or thought you would, but then the other thing is your quality of sleep for that night is probably terrible, right? And so when your sleep is bad, everything else in your body suffers, everything, right? Because you can't repair cells, blah, blah, blah. And so your entire next day is probably going to be crappy just because you decided to check your email one time before you went to bed. And so like, those are the kind of things, that's just one very simple example, the kind of things that I'm trying to help people start to be aware of, or like maybe then the next time they check the email, they ask themselves, is it really going to serve me well to check my email at 10 o'clock before I go to bed, or should I just wait till morning?
Which it's probably one of these also habits that people have just created where, like I was just talking about, mindlessness or whatever, not even knowing that you're scrolling through Instagram or looking at your emails. And I've noticed for me that, and it's a terrible thing that I did one time, that, I was having a conversation at the gym with one of my bros, and then randomly during mid conversation, I just grabbed my phone and just started scrolling. And he's like, "What?" And he called me out on it. Thank God.
Good.
Yeah. He goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, dude, if I was not, living up to your standards or whatever." And I was like, "Bro, I am so sorry," And it's one of these things that, when people say they're bored or whatever, like to stand in a line, you see everybody just got their phone just scrolling through, and this is like, how is this impacting their day? And I guess my point is that I'm one of those people that through my work, like as far as tickets, and I work in IT for a higher ed, that all of our stuff comes in through email, basically, and for my part of the group. And that I just, I'm always just checking it, because I'm either just have my phone obviously right beside me. And it's just so easy for me. Let me see if anything come in. Oh, nope, good. All right, cool. And it's like you said, like, oh, that can wait, or oh, maybe I should just go ahead and do that now and get it done with. And it impacts you. It does impact you, especially the mental part of it.
Well, it really does. And what a lot of people don't realize is, not every time, but a lot of the times when you interact with technology, like for instance, every time you check your email, every time you check a notification on your smartphone, it does activate your sympathetic nervous system, this fight or flight system. But the problem is your fight or flight system needs at least 30 minutes or more to downregulate and recover. Well, the average person checks their email once every 6 minutes during the workday, and they get a smartphone notification once every 15 minutes. And so you're doing the math and saying, oh, well, I'm for sure interacting with technology way more frequently than every 30 minutes. And that's correct. And what's happening then is almost every person on earth that uses a cell phone or internet is activating this fight or flight system throughout the day. And it's making them more amped up and nervous and stressed out throughout the entire day. And they never have a chance to recover.
Sure.
And I truly believe that this is the root cause of not all, but like a big part of the mental health crisis today. This is what I believe is really contributing to it.
Well, speaking of books again, have you read, is it The Coddling of the American Mind?
So a lot of people have mentioned that book to me and I haven't read it yet, but I appreciate that recommendation. I'm going to write it down again.
Well, I mean, the gist of it is that I think it's Jonathan Haidt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And he actually throws out a bunch of scenarios and statistics about how, I think one of the more things that come to mind is like how, small girls have suffered from more mental illness just from being cyberbullied and having screens in front of them and not even being able to live up to the standards of their parents in some sort just because of I guess I don't know if it was technology or what that point it was, but yeah, it's a good book. It just talks about how this is more mental illness cases are arising these past, I forgot what years he covered, but yeah, and it was like, just due to technology and screens.
So it's interesting, right? If you look at, and I've studied this very, very closely with a different book called iGen by Jean Twenge, and she basically is like this generational researcher. So she researches all the different ways that the lives of different people are affected by different things in life, right?
Sure.
And so what one of the graphs in the book just blew me away when I saw it. So like you could see a graph of like teenagers' depressive symptoms, and they were relatively steady or actually declining a little bit for like a decade. But then around 2012, they just started to hockey stick. Well, guess what happened in 2012? Two things. That was the first year that smartphone penetration reached 50% in the United States. And it was also the same year that Facebook bought Instagram. And so, and there's it was very hard to prove a couple years ago, but now we have very, very clear evidence that excessive social media use causes depression, causes anxiety, and in some extreme circumstances causes people to be suicidal.
I agree.
There's very clear evidence. It's not, you can't debate it. And so I think, and this is probably a somewhat unpopular opinion, but this again, like the stuff that I want people to hear is I truly believe that social media is the cigarette of the 21st century. And I think in 10 years from now, we're going to be like, what on earth are we thinking giving these 12-year-olds unlimited access to this insanely addictive platform on their phone, and it's super convenient, and we're expecting them to just use it to stay in contact with people but don't get addicted. Like that's impossible, especially when you're 12 or 10 or however young you get it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, to me, I'm glad, I liked how you said that. It's a cigarette of
the 21st century.
21st century. I like that. I'm going to have to remember that. But no, I wholeheartedly agree with you, just because the internet is like the wild, wild west right now. We're still figuring it out as we go. And in 10 years now, we don't know what it's going to be like. When did the first iPhone come out? 2009, 2008?
2007. Yeah.
2007. So yeah, and it's like, look, what is that? 13 years, 14 years we've already came up. Like, wow, 15 years actually. It's like, look how much has changed. And it get faster so many different years because we get better at the technology. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like, wow, okay, so now in 2030, what is it going to be like?
Right. And it's, and everybody's talking about like the metaverse this and the metaverse that. And I'm actually, again, I think the metaverse is going to be able to do good things for humanity. And just, by the way, before I talk about this more, I just want to be super clear. I'm a nerd and I love technology. I built my first computer in middle school. So the way that I kind of describe my stance is I'm not anti-technology, I'm pro-humanity, right? So this is not an anti-technology stance that I have. But I think that what's going to happen is people are going to, if the metaverse becomes, think about this, right? So if the metaverse world becomes so real that we prefer our life in the metaverse compared to real life, don't you think that's going to have a bunch of real difficult problems that people, like mental issues that people are going to have to navigate? Because think about that. It's, if I prefer this virtual world and not the real world, I'm just going to only want to be in the virtual world. And what do you think that's going to do to my identity in the real world? It's going to destroy it. Exactly. It's going to make me feel like total crap about myself in the real world.
Yeah.
because I'm this amazingly successful and wealthy or whatever person in the metaverse. And
Yeah.
I don't think that humanity is ready to deal with that mentally.
Oh, I agree with you on that too, just because, and I don't want to, again, I guess I'll touch on what you just said before your comment that, I don't want to shit on technology either, because it has made a lot of things very
Totally.
easy for us in jobs. And I was going to get into like the pro things of it, but, and to your point though, there's again, another book, Addiction, I think is what it was called, by Adam Alter. And he talks about how, people who've got so sucked into like World of Warcraft, and they, live their life, they're 24/7 being this avatar in that world, and they let their lives go to ruin just because they like their life playing in front of the keyboard in World of Warcraft better than their own.
Well, and dude, I should have said this earlier, Chris. So when I was in, I'll tell you guys a quick story. When I was in high school, it was a very tough time for me because I had really bad acne, like extremely bad. It was very crippling to me, socially crippling. And I had very low self-esteem and self-worth. It was really a tough time. And one of the unfortunate side effects of me having this bad acne was that I actually became addicted to video games. And it wasn't World of Warcraft because that wasn't out yet, but I was addicted to Diablo 2, which is very similar.
Nice.
And so I would play, real late in the night when I was in high school. And, this though was in the mid 90s before most people even had a cell phone or an internet connected computer at home. And then at different parts of my life, I was also addicted to Facebook and email. And so I've been addicted to many different technologies, and I've experienced that firsthand, right? So I'm not just like I'm this is a very personal issue for me that I've experienced, and I want to prevent other people from going through what I went through, because that wasn't fun. None of those were fun. And, I just don't think that people are aware that these things can even be addictive, or maybe they're aware, but they don't know what to do, and that's why I want to help them figure out some strategies and what to do.
Yeah. What's one of those things that you don't realize that how much time you're actually putting into, or how much time goes by if you actually play a video game, and just, where your day goes, because you're either, it's very, most game, I'm like really like task oriented games. And that I used to play a lot too back in the day, but all my friends started getting married, having kids and stuff. So we still try to play one night a week, but
nice.
One of those things, you say, oh, I'm going to play for an hour. Well, it's like 6 hours later. It's like, shit, what did I just do? Then like, and it's one of those things too. It's like, oh, well, if you can get a certain item in the game or whatever, it's like, oh, I could just grind this out for another hour. Then half the night's gone and you keep grinding. And, I don't want to say I was ever addicted to a video game, but if there was one video game I was addicted to, it was a basketball game. It was called NBA 2K. I think it was like 17 or something. Okay.
Nice.
And it was just because all of my friends, we all played it together. And it was, when we all got out of college, all of my friends we all moved away from each other. Right.
Yeah.
So it was one of those things like how we kind of stuck together. We were playing against, we'd get on the same team. We'd play other people around the world. We were trying to get good at it. We got pretty bad at it. But, it was one of those things like I was waking up early and grinding my player out to make it the best that he could, It was like, shit, I got to go to work now. And I'd come home on my lunch break and so I got to get a couple games in. And even like I almost got to the point where I started skipping my workouts and my training for my CrossFit stuff. I was like, whoa, dude. And like, and that's, that's probably a very poor example because it was probably nothing addicting like how I just said about the guy in World of Warcraft or like you just talked about. But for me, that's when I kind of knew like how much time am I putting into this, and wow, what should I be doing with all this time? And and I don't regret it because it got to a point where I was like, all right, set a time frame. You're only going to play for these amount of hours, and I just had to get self-discipline. It's like all right, and it made it for me. I wasn't stressing over it. I wasn't worried about it anymore. I was just have fun with it. So
yeah, man. Well, that really resonates with me, Chris. And when I realized I was addicted to Facebook, I found myself opening up the Facebook app on my phone when I was in elevators and I had a 20-second break, or when I was at red lights driving.
I'm right there with you. I know.
And I was like, what the F am I doing? I'm filling these 20-second spots of my day with Facebook. Like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, this is a problem. Like, I was trying to be objective. This is a problem. And, to your point, So what a lot of people don't realize about especially social media, but really a lot of the technology companies, is the main business model is to get as much of your time and attention as possible.
Right.
The reason is, if they get as much time and attention as possible, that means they serve up more ads to you and they get more money and they become more profitable. And so human time and attention is now the most valuable resource on the planet. It's more valuable than oil. And so when you realize that, when you can see that and you keep that in mind, all of a sudden, all the business models become clear. That's why you have so many notifications on your phone. That's why all the apps want you to come back and use it every day.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest well, I don't think I know, the biggest time suck by far for everybody, at least in America, is social media. So the average American uses their smartphone right around 4 hours a day. And the average person is on social media 2 hours and 14 minutes a day. So over half of our phone use is now spent on social media.
Wow.
And but think about it. That's average, right? 2 hours and 14 minutes. If you're a young person, you probably greatly or way above average. I've easily talked to a lot of people who are 4 or 5 hours a day on social media. So think about that. If you're on social media 5 hours a day times 7 days a week, that's 35 hours. That's almost a full-time job that you're doing for no pay, right?
Right.
And so those are the kind of things that I want to bring awareness to for people, so that they can ask themselves, does it really serve me well to spend 2 hours and 14 minutes a day on social media? Or would I rather maybe cut that time in half and spend the extra 7 hours a week with my family? Or traveling or exercising or doing whatever, anything else other than social media.
All right, so playing devil's advocate here, would it be the argument for that is that, oh, well, there's, I don't know, an influencer making 6 figures a year on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. I mean, well, so why can't I do it? If they're making that type of money and they're spending all their time, going through their comments and notifications and whatever I don't know, just making twerking videos, whatever they do. But it's just, but I'm not knocking it. If you're making money, if you're happy, whatever, do it. I don't care. But I guess that would be the counter argument for that statement, right?
Yeah, well, I have a bunch of things to totally understand that. And I have a bunch of things to say about that. First of all, you have to look at what's the real world percentage that you become, and we'll define successful influencer as someone who makes $100,000 or more a year in income, right?
Okay.
And I don't know what the statistic is, but it's way, way, way less than 1%. Way less than 1% of people on social media are making $100,000 in income. Let's say it's 0.01%, right? It's and so what young people don't get is, they'll only see the people who have made it on social media, but what they don't see is the literally millions of people who have tried to do that and failed. They don't see that, because no one's going to put on social media, "Hey, I suck, I failed, and here's what you can learn from that." No one's going to say that. And even if they did, their account probably wouldn't be that big because they failed. So, but the other thing is, which I think is extremely misleading, is a lot of the influencers, in my opinion, misrepresent their true success. And that's because they want to, give you this air of, a certain this or that. And that, I guess, makes them more appealing to follow. And so, I've seen there's a show on Netflix, I forgot what it was called, but it was about influencers and what they do to stage their posts. And you can rent a fake plane and take a picture out the side of it, but it's like a stage. It's not a real plane, just so that you can it's for influencers, right? And so I'm not saying that all influencers are doing this, and but it's just interesting to think about, right? How this has changed, really changed the way we think about social media.
Well, going back towards human psychology, or I guess that would be the right word, that most people who become these influencers and they are trying to, make those stage pics and get, 20,000 likes on each picture, don't they have some type of, I don't know if it's I hope I say this right too. It's like a micro narcissism or some kind of need or attention thing of mental illness, just having to get those all the time. And that's they suffer the most from it. They just, it's like suffering in silence, but they're making their lives better than what it is.
Well, Chris, that's really interesting you say that. And like, again, I'm going to cite some statistics that are like general statistics. They're not, directed toward a specific person. But that's another thing that I think young people don't realize is a lot of, not all, but I think a lot of the people who are influencers actually are very depressed and they actually hate doing it after a long period of time. Not right away. I think in the first year or two, it's like, oh, this is great. But I think after a while, think about it like this. You hear a lot about movie stars, like let's say for 20 years ago, before social media even was existed, right? You would always hear like movie stars had a lot of mental illnesses and problems too, right? And
Sure.
the reason is one of the main reasons, not the only reason, but one of the main reasons is when you are a star, everyone is always looking at you and they're always thinking things about you and they're judging you and they're, saying things about you, and you can't control all that. You can only control a certain amount of it, but not all of it. And so when you can't control, again, autonomy, right? Like the number one human need is autonomy. When you can't control what's being said about you, you perceive it as a threat and it's very stressful. And that is why a lot of celebrities have a really hard time being a celebrity, because you never get privacy. There's all these people saying things. And so in being an influencer is exactly the same thing. But the thing that's even worse about it is you probably weren't famous before you were an influencer. And so you don't know how to deal with it psychologically. So like you're thrown in this new world of fame that you don't know how to deal with. And that's super difficult for anyone.
Yeah. Well, it seems like, I mean, generally speaking, of course, all the childhood stars are the ones that, they grew up and seem to have most of these random illnesses or tough times in life that more than anybody else, who a person who maybe got famous later in life, and then kind of figured it out on their own. But the ones like you just said, they always had the eyes on, on them at a young age and then grow up with it. They were just kind of like seem to be the most troubled. Could be wrong on that. Probably am wrong with it, but I'm just going off random cases that I know off the top of my head.
Oh yeah, that's another comment I was going to make that I hope again, like, doesn't offend people. But what's interesting is these researchers have done some studies on what are the types of people that generally use social media the most. And ironically, the people that use social media the most in general are the people who connect with other people in person the least. They have the the most troubled relationships in the real world, and so they kind of go online as a way to cope with that and connect with people online.
That's I never thought about that. That's really a good point. And I never would have thought about that. That it's like almost going back to what you were just talking about, with your own personal experiences. That you went towards Facebook and Diablo because you were having trouble with your acne problem or whatever, right? So yeah, it's like the escape from their reality and
right.
Like
what's a coping mechanism,
right? Yeah, and it's like what people might like you, and to your point earlier, like start to treat the metaverse as like it's like Ready Player One type stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow, dude. And I don't want to keep thinking we're just like completely dogging technology, but
no.
But there's been what's kind of changed a little bit, but there has been some good things to it. I mean, like you and I could have never had this conversation tonight without it. But and it's made, as far as going back on a 4-day work week and stuff. I mean, most people found out that, and even with COVID, they can do 80, 90, 70% of their job through their house as long as they have a laptop, right?
Yeah. Well, here's the way, I think for me, it's helpful to think of technology like this. I think of technology as a tool. Let's pretend we're talking about a hammer, right? A hammer can be used to build a house, or it can be used to hit someone on the head, right? This technology is no different. It's just a different type of tool. And so I can use it for great things to enhance my life, and I can use it for things that make my life hell. And that's again the whole point of my company, Humans First, is to help people understand the ways that they could improve their self-care and their own mental health and relationships and productivity by enhancing their life with technology, not destroying it, not making it worse.
Do you think that with technology and as much as we can do, I mean, I can sit here from while we do this podcast and remote into my computer on campus and take care of all the servers or whatever I need to do, that it almost makes us less productive just because we can do that so easily now? Then we have more time to go scroll through Instagram and Facebook and get in the game of whatever.
Oh yeah, man. So I have a couple of statistics for you. So let's pretend you're having an amazing day at work and you're just crushing it, like everything is just going amazingly well, right?
Right.
That's a psychological state called flow. And so these researchers analyzed how productive people are when they're in flow. And when you're in flow, you can be up to 500% more productive than when you're not. And so what that means is if you have 2 hours in flow, you can get more done in those 2 hours than an entire day without it. But here's the problem is when you're in flow and you get interrupted, and that could be as simple as an email or a phone call or a Slack message, it takes you 26 minutes to get back into flow. Well, when people are checking their email and Slack once every 6 minutes and getting a smartphone notification once every 15 minutes, you know that almost no one is ever in flow at all. And so we're never ever nearly as productive as we could be.
Interesting. That's a good point. Huh. I never heard that before, but I like that. You
So
ever?
that's
No, yeah. Go ahead.
So, well, that's one of the things that that's really the core of my program with Humans First is to help people eliminate distractions and focus on what matters most. And if you can do that, and it sounds simple in theory, and it is if you're just open minded, but there's so much that goes into that, like changing your notifications, changing your work setup, changing your desktop, all these things, right? But once you do it and get it all structured in a way that is conducive to you focusing, it's a total game changer.
You ever read? Well, I haven't read this book. I've just read the synopsis of it, I guess. But it's called Bullshit Jobs.
No, who's that by?
I'd have to look it up, man. I can't remember it because like I said, I didn't read it, but I got like the gist of what it was on. Here, I can look it up real quick.
Yeah.
It's by David Graeber, Graeber. But the whole point of the or premise behind the book is that people have these jobs nowadays where they fake like they're working more than they actually are working.
Okay, interesting. Really? That's the whole premise of the book?
Basically, yeah. So
wow.
It talks about how so many it's like really hurting people emotionally and psychologically that they're having to pretend like they're working for 6, 7, 8 hours a day just to keep their jobs, and that they're not getting that purpose or meaningful coming in doing a good day's work, that they just sit there and just like their boss comes around, they start typing or something like, oh yeah, killing it today, boss, yeah, no worries. And like that's their whole day is just trying to act like they're working. And
yeah, that kind of reminds me that the number one thing so like if you ask someone, did you have a good day at work today? And they answer yes, the number one thing most highly correlated with them saying yes is if they made progress in something meaningful, like in like an important project or
sure.
initiative.
Sure.
And so when people are I'm guessing, I don't know, obviously I didn't read the book, but I'm guessing when people are doing these bullshit jobs, virtually no one is thinking that they made progress in something important, and their job probably doesn't feel like it has a lot of meaning to it.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Talking about earlier in our conversation, we were talking about the brain and its act of like, trying to be surviving, or, that act of survival or survival instincts or whatever, that, I think most humans want to, like you said, have that purpose and that mastery in their life. And they want to have some task where they actually feel like they're doing something with their lives. And I think that goes back to our primitive instincts or whatever, just because it was always people working to keep the tribe up or having to eat that night and stuff like that. And then, and I'm one of those people too and my mind is like very task oriented. Like I love doing tasks, like those video games I was talking about. So I got to go do that now. I like being busy. I like having to do things like, I don't like to let my mind just kind of start wandering. And even though I've heard that, if you do let this kind of off topic, if you let your mind wander, where your heart is. I don't know.
I like that.
Yeah, I don't know how true.
That's cool.
Yeah, I like that too. And I was like, when I heard that, I was like, I guess that's kind of point too. But I noticed that I kind of feel like I'm getting lazy, or I'm not moving forward, or I got to be doing something. But if I do get tasks done, I feel satisfied. I feel successful throughout my day. Then I think most people like that, rather than just running around trying to figure out how to fake like they're being busy all day or got through a project.
Yeah, I mean I really like that phrase. When you let your mind wander, where your heart is. That's really cool. I kind of fight. Like something you said resonated with me in that I used to always feel like I needed to be doing something productive, but I realized that that's impossible. Like you can't be productive for the 16 hours a day that you're awake, or even 10 hours a day, right? Like it's just not possible day after day, maybe one day, right? But and by having some downtime and giving myself permission to take the downtime and relax and enjoy other things, or do something fun, or maybe even just do nothings, maybe just I sit there and pet the cat with my wife and just chat about whatever, like that. We did that last night for an hour and a half before bed, and I like really liked that. Like that was probably one of the best parts of my week so far, and so like it was an adjustment for me to kind of go from this always having to be doing something productive to like giving myself permission to not do something productive and be okay with that. It took a while for me to be comfortable with that.
Yeah, it's almost one of those entrepreneurial stereotype kind of feelings that, oh, you have to be working 16 hours a day no matter what to get so far in life and to be successful. And like Elon Musk sleeping on the what did he sleep on the production floor in order to get his Tesla factory up? And I'm not knocking that. I mean, I'm sure there is truth to that, but that
Well,
I'm just wondering that, it's one of those things we talked about earlier. It's like quality versus, how much quality of the work are you actually getting done, and how much are you actually doing besides this? When people say they had to work a 16-hour shift, in that tire factory, I was talking about, well, how much work did you actually do besides walking around talking to other people and acting like you were working?
well, it's interesting. Like I know a lot of I know that I know that Elon Musk is very controversial, right? And I super respect him as a business person, and I think that he's very smart. But I also, I always when I look at people like that, or I look at Bill Gates, or I look at Steve Jobs, or whomever, or Warren Buffett, I always look at the full picture, right? Because let's take Elon Musk. I mean, super brilliant guy, but he still is working these insane hours, and like why, I don't really know. He's also, by the way, divorced 3 times. And again, like no offense to people who have been divorced, but for myself, like if I could trade, having his wealth but being divorced 3 times, or being me and being but not being divorced at all, I would be me, because I don't like all the wealth in the world wouldn't ever matter, like wouldn't measure up to me being with my wife. Like I would choose my wife over any amount of anything, right? And I guess there's like to me there's there's these consequences to being that successful that people don't see. And I don't think that they take them into account when they, for instance, evaluate Elon Musk's life. They just look at the business side and see he is at one point the wealthiest person in the world, but they don't look at the 3 divorces and the other stuff that, maybe is less virtuous about his life, we'll say.
Do you think it's speaking and touching on that? Do you think that I can't? I hope I don't. I'm probably gonna butcher this way to say it, but being Elon Musk is almost a pro and a con at the same time. And I guess what I'm getting at is that because I think you said on he was on Joe Rogan's podcast here, and that Joe Rogan asked him about something with his brain or something like that, and he said, I don't wish anybody to have my brain, just because it seems like it's just always going so fast and so much, 24/7. It's like he can't turn it off. Like you were saying, like there's times like, hey, I just want to sit and chill, like he just can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So I probably should have said this earlier, but I have ADHD, and that's a very common characteristic of the ADHD brain. It's like a famous psychologist described it like this. He said, "You have not to me, but just to a general person, right? You have a Ferrari of a mind. You just need to learn how to apply the brakes." And I do feel like that's just my mind is like that, and so one of the things that I actually have done recently is to take up meditation. And I tried for so many years, Chris, so many years to try to meditate. And I just like, it's not that I couldn't do it. I just wasn't putting in the effort, to be honest. And now though that I've gotten through 10 sessions, and I can already see a difference in 10 sessions, like a meaningful difference. I, think that that's going to be a game changer for me. And I do think it like helps me quiet my brain to some degree, which sounds kind of weird, but I agree that it's a positive and a negative in that a racing brain like goes through lots of information and thoughts well, but then when you want to calm down and rest and relax, it's a negative. Yeah. So I agree with your statement.
Yeah, I hope I don't forget these 2 points, but I mean, you said that's weird to say. I don't believe that's definitely not weird to say, because meditations helps out in a lot of different ways, and I think it goes very unnoticed, but especially in before 2020 or even before the year 2000. But I think now, for whatever reason, just because maybe the podcast or there's so much information that we have access to, that it's so beneficial to see, like, how meditating for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour out of the day really helps people. And it's almost, it used to be one of those things I feel that, oh, we should never talk about, meditations because that's just for hippie people. And that's just, you don't need to be doing that. But, and I don't mean to offend anybody by saying that, but it's, it's seems more acceptable to practice meditating throughout your day. And even if it's just for 10 minutes a day, and however you want to do it, if it's just, going for a walk or sitting alone in your car or going for a drive and listen to your favorite song. I mean, I guess there's different forms of it, but if that's meditation to you, but really, that's my point. It's like so beneficial now. It's people are like more accepting of it rather than just saying, nah, that doesn't work.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting is this is just like my theory, right? I didn't read this somewhere, but I have this theory that meditation is like a lot of technology use is like the opposite of meditation. Here's why I believe that. So for any humans in general, one of the main reasons or benefits of meditating is that it brings you into the present. And so you're not ruminating about the past or worrying about the future, right? So you're in this present state. Well, what does technology do? Every time you interact with it, it's pulling you out of the present. It's like the opposite of meditation. You're getting sucked into this digital email inbox, or you're getting sucked into this text message world, or you're getting sucked into this social media world and taken out of the present. And so if you think about it in that way, if we're being taken out of the present hundreds of times a day by our technology, and that is the opposite of meditation, that probably can't be good for our mental health.
No, I agree. And going back real quick, and I just want to make sure I didn't forget this point. I wanted to ask you this, that, growing up with ADHD, and like you said that, your brain is a Ferrari, at a young age, was that tough for you? And like, in order to learn how to keep control of that and like keep your brain in the, I guess the lane, so to speak, or in the road, not outside the barrier?
So dude, what's funny? I'm laughing because, I was such a handful for my parents. I was such an energetic kid. They could not control me. I would throw things all the time. I would do all kinds of crazy things. In fact, my grandma, who had seven kids, right? My grandma said if any one of her kids would have been like me, she would have stopped having kids. And so, yes, I think it was, and I didn't realize it at the time, right? But I think it was extremely hard for me to be focused, to stay in one place, to follow the directions. It was really hard. Really hard.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how old you are. I'm 36. So I don't know if it was overdiagnosed or just nobody really knew how to handle it. But, I didn't never, I'm sure I have some form of, was it just ADD, not ADHD, but just, and I just, cause I would get bored or I was wanting to go do something else. I was like you, but it's more energy based. Like I couldn't sit down and be still. Like at one point in my elementary school, they put me in, I think they called it, if my brother was here, I'd ask him like a challenge, or it's like not a gifted program or something, but it was like a thing where it's like, Chapter one, maybe is what they called it. And it was like for things like, oh, there's maybe something wrong with him, but we just don't know what it is. So we got to get him outside the normal class.
Wow.
Yeah. It wasn't like a gifted program or anything like that. It was just like, we know something's going on. But it wasn't really, it was just being a kid, and I just had a lot of age and I didn't want to be sitting still.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you feel like it helped you to be in that environment then? Like in a different environment?
It was kind of what you were saying that, and this was first, second, third grade. I was really young. I just remember being like, I don't understand why I'm not in the classroom. Like, why am I here?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really remember learning anything different or being like, oh, this is really helping me or anything. It was just more of like, I just remember like, I'm not with my friends. I don't get it. Why am I? And I was never really told like why. And then after a while, they finally just let me go back in. But until to this day, it was like, and I think it's just because of some other situations within my family, like my brother has cerebral palsy, and I think they thought there was something related there. And this was like back in the early 90s and stuff that, I never really spoke about this on the podcast before, but that they thought that was something wrong with me because I correlated with my brother. And I think that was part of it too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what's kind of crazy though, is that I didn't actually get diagnosed for ADHD until less than a year ago. And I'm almost 40. Right. And, So I went 39 years without knowing, like without having an official diagnosis. And as soon as I heard that though, and I've been researching so much about psychology over the last 4 years, it actually kind of in a way almost made me feel better because I was like, oh, like now this explains so many things. Like now I understand why I do this or why I feel this or why I say this. And it kind of like put a lot of pieces to the puzzle together in my mind, which actually was kind of comforting to me in a way. I
Yeah.
don't know if
Yeah, it makes sense because you're developing that self-awareness, and that's one of the things I've learned throughout my life path or experience that you want to call it. And like you were saying, like, why do I think this way, or why did I do things this way? And it was kind of like, oh, this is just maybe how I'm wired, or it's just like maybe I picked this up from somewhere along my childhood trauma, or I don't know, whatever. Which I had a great childhood. I mean, I'm not knocking that by any means, but it's just one of those things that when an action is performed, I have to sit down now and be like, all right, so what's going on here? Like gathering all the information, kind of like what we were talking about earlier in the conversation. And that's why I can kind of reflect on it and be like, okay, how did that make me feel? Did I like that? Can I change that? How can I do that better? Why did I do it this way? And that's one thing that I've noticed is that, and then through all my aspects of life now, that, it's really beneficial to me for whatever reason, just that self awareness.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Chris, because my wife and I talk about this a lot, and she's, I credit her for helping me be much more self aware about a lot of things, and I'm really grateful for that. And I kind of think of self awareness as just like any other skill, right? Like you can be good at playing chess, and you can be good at soccer, and you can be good at self awareness, right? And I do think that it is developable. Like I think that you can get better at it, just like any other skill. And some people are naturally good at it. I was horrible at it for the first probably 30 years of my life.
Yeah.
And so it is a skill that I have really tried to cultivate, and I'm still working on it. Like I think it's going to be a lifelong thing. It's a journey, not a destination for that. But I'm okay with that. I like that.
And it's one of those things going back to, I'm not knocking education again, but, I didn't know, like you just said, you called it a skill. I would have never thought that self-awareness was a skill. I would have never thought self-discipline was a skill. I thought, I used to be one of those kids back in high school and college. And I've said this before on here, folks, so don't get mad at me, but that I thought working hard was, just for losers for whatever reason. It's like, oh, you're going to try, bro? Like, what, what the heck, man? Like, who does that? Like, nerd, you lose. And that it was, I don't know if maybe that was just maybe having the wrong type of mindset during those times, and that not knowing that how to self improve and like how I could be better. It was just that I just thought things were probably just the way they were, just the way they were. And maybe I just grew up and I'm matured. I don't know. And actually sat down or maybe it's all these books that we've been talking about that I actually started like, oh, there's some science to all this stuff. And this is now starting to put together.
When you were thinking those things, were you getting good grades at the time?
In high school or?
Well, whenever you had those thoughts that you were talking about. Like working hardest for the nerds or whatever.
No, in high school, no, I was terrible. Like I would do in high school, I was the person who would just do good enough to get by.
Yeah.
So,
do you think that there could have been some element of jealousy or envy in like toward the nerds because they were probably working hard and getting good grades?
No, and I've had that thought too, because at the time I didn't really, it was like, I don't care, and I didn't really have a set goal. Like, I didn't know if I wanted to go to college. I ended up going to community college just because I thought that's what you had to do. Like you had to go to some kind of college, not to be a loser. But it was one of those things that in high school, it's like, oh, well, whatever. I mean, I'm getting by. I mean, I don't care. Like I didn't care about being the smartest kid, or I didn't care about, getting an A on the test or whatever. I just thought that I could just do good enough and get by, then nobody would care. And I just stuck with that mentality. I mean, I probably even had it most of my undergrad. And it wasn't until when I did my graduate degrees when I kind of switched things on it. Hey, man, there is something to working hard and getting good grades and, actually learning the material rather than just, crushing some stuff the night before the test and just hopefully getting a decent grade on it.
Yeah. Honestly, that's one of my biggest regrets is I was such a procrastinator all throughout high school and college. And I was, I guess, lucky enough that I could just cram and still get decent grades. But I wish I had learned how to really learn before, like when I was in like middle school. And I think I would have absorbed or like retained so much more long-term information. I really wish I would have done that.
Yeah, no, I would definitely would love to go back and redo some things. And and I'm glad you asked that, because that puts things to a different perspective. Because I thought that before, that was I just jealous that they were getting, or was I envious of them getting better grades than me? And I don't really honestly don't think it was. I just think it was just that I'm getting by, and that's all I cared about. And there was nobody really there to put me in place and check me that, hey man, do better. Why are you just doing enough to get by? And I remember one time, and I know we're kind of over time here, and this is probably a little off topic, but in my 12th grade English class, I had to write a report on, it's called A Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift. Have you ever read it?
No.
Okay. So the whole gist of it is that I think it's in England, and they have a poor economy going on, and he proposes that they should start fattening up, newborn babies and selling them and eating them to, help, get the economy back going and getting food. And it's kind of a weird thing, and it's always stuck with me. But yeah, I don't think it's a long of a read either. So it's called A Modest Proposal by, I think it's Jonathan Swift. And so, and he argues about saying like how it would be so good for the country and, good for the health of the people and things like that. But I remember my 12th grade teacher kind of sat me down and was like, because I was half-assed in the thing, and he just kind of said, hey man, you're not going to graduate unless you really pass this thing. And that was one of the first kind of rude awakening that I got. Was like, maybe I should actually start putting some more effort into things, and that was like, it was almost too late then. It was probably like the last semester of high school. So that's when he first gave me my first kick in the ass. I was like, okay, I can't be an idiot the rest of my life. I mean, yeah. So, and
it's interesting how we remember those conversations like that.
Yeah. It's one of those teachers that, stick out in your mind, and that, you always have one or two of them throughout your life that are kind of like, thanks, dude. Hey, thanks, man. So,
yeah. You know what? It's interestingly, I had a teacher like that named John Becker, and he was a high school English teacher, and he taught me for 2 years, not just one. And I was so appreciative of him that I wanted to thank him, and I found out that he passed away. Yeah. And so, one of the things that I wanted to actually do is, thank you for reminding me, is to like write a letter to his family and let them know that I really appreciated their father for doing that, for teaching me. And I wish I had done that sooner when he was still alive, because I kind of regret not telling him while he was still here. I'm sure he would have liked to hear that.
Sure, man. I mean, yeah, time waits for no one. So if you get those opportunities, man, you got to attack them like you can, for sure. Mm-hmm. So, Rob, I don't want to end this on a good note, or on a bad note, but I think this is a good spot to take this home on right there.
Yeah. Well, how about, can I leave the listeners with one last thought? It'll be a good way to.
Yeah. I was getting ready to ask you if you wanted to plug anything, leave anybody with a last thought, like you just said, plug your businesses, whatever people want to find you, all that good stuff you got. Floor is yours, man.
Oh, sure. So, well, I'll offer something to the listeners. So you can do a free 30-minute technology mindfulness consultation call with me. All you need to do to redeem that is just email me. My email address is rob, R-O-B, at humansfirst.us. If you just put the name of this, Shelor Select in the subject line of the email and say you want to do a 30-minute call, I'm happy to set something up with you guys. So we'll do that for you. And then the last thought I wanted to leave everyone with was this. My wife and I really thought that this was special. And we actually said this at a toast at our wedding to the guests. The amount of love, success, and happiness in this world are infinite. So imagine how much love, success, and happiness we can all have together if we all decided to put humans first.
That's the way to end it right there. Rob, man, you're a cool dude, man. I appreciate you being here, bro.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. It's been great. I really appreciate you as well. Thank you.
All right, folks, we're gone. Good night.